Welcome to the Middle Ages. Not in the fairy tale world of knights, princesses, and shiny castles, but in the real one. Dirty, dark, stinky. Full of diseases, hunger, and constant fear of what the new day might bring. Today we will set out together into an ordinary medieval town, into a time when there was no modern infrastructure, no electricity, no hospitals, no scientific knowledge. Close your eyes. Imagine you are in the Middle Ages, and it is the year 1350. You are standing on a dusty street. The sun is just rising over the horizon, and the town is starting to come to life. Crowds of people weave around you, hurrying to their daily duties. From the bakery comes the smell of fresh bread, which is often inedible because it is full of mold. But just a few steps away, you are already smelling a completely different odor. A stench that never disappears. Dead rats, excrement, vomit, rot. Welcome to a world where clean water was a luxury and where even a simple cold could mean a death sentence. In the Middle Ages, washing was considered suspicious. Seriously. People believed that if they washed, they would open their pores and dirt, and especially diseases, would enter the body. Washing was basically taboo, unless it was under exceptional circumstances, such as religious ceremonies. In the year 1215, at the beginning of the medieval period, Pope Innocent III even issued a decree that forbade Christians from bathing in public bathhouses because it was considered immoral. At that time, people believed that bathing could open the body to demons and evil spirits. Some even thought that the spread of diseases like the plague originated in bathhouses and cleanliness itself. So most city dwellers washed themselves only very rarely. For men, it was common to wash just a few times a year. Women who had less free time were even worse off. All the problems with hygiene had catastrophic consequences for the health of the population. Cities had no sewage system. The contents of chamber pots, in other words, toilets, were simply poured straight out the window onto the street. Yes, that's right. Someone could easily dump a bucket of human excrement and water used for washing meat right onto your head. All of it ended up on dirty streets that were covered in waste. That's why a common warning shout was, "Watch out below," or in French cities, "Garde à l'eau," which, by the way, later evolved into the word loo, the British slang term for toilet. The streets were completely overloaded with filth, and not just that kind of waste. People threw out leftover food, dirty water, washed dishes in rivers, and the entire town was one big dumping ground. Many cities, especially in medieval London, were actually so polluted that when it rained, the water in the streets was literally black. Such an environment was perfect for the spread of disease. Medieval towns were the perfect place for the spread of disease. The worst of all, of course, was the plague, the Black Death. It first struck in the 14th century and wiped out 1/3 to 1/2 of the European population. People didn't know what caused it. They blamed Jews, cats, witches, anything that seemed supernatural at the time. In the year 1404, during the worst wave of the plague, Jews were accused of poisoning the wells and were burned in large numbers. The plague spread incredibly fast. One infected person was enough for an entire village or town to fall. People started dying within just a few days. Fever rose, skin turned blue, and they suffocated. It's no wonder they introduced all sorts of methods to fight the plague, even though most of them were completely ineffective. People, for example, put fragrant herbs on their faces or wore bird-like masks filled with herbs and spices to protect their bodies from the stench and infection. The plague mask worn by doctors looked more like a creepy bird than actual protection. In the year 1436, during one of the largest plague outbreaks in history, more than 25 million people died in Europe. During the plague, people wore masks with bird-like beaks. Into these they placed fragrant herbs because doctors believed that disease spread through smell, through miasma. Diseases like typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, or leprosy were a common part of life, and often of death. People had no access to modern medicine or antibiotics. When someone had a fever, there was nothing that could truly cure them. Doctors recommended strange methods that were supposed to refresh the body, like inhaling the smell of burnt sticks or bathing in herbal mixtures. And what did people eat in the Middle Ages? The staple foods were porridge, bread, onions, garlic, and occasionally some legumes. Meat was rare and expensive, especially for the poor. And fish? That was common, especially during fasts. And there were more than 160 fasting days each year. When meat was available, it wasn't always of the best quality. It was often spoiled meat, covered with spices or other aromas to mask the rotten taste. A medieval person would probably have trouble understanding today's obsession with fresh food. At that time, once something was harvested or slaughtered, it spoiled quickly. What was left was cooked in large pots and eaten with minimal seasoning, or it was completely rotten and eaten out of hunger. One example is the famous English black pudding, a blood sausage made from pork and blood. Food was often heavily spiced, not for taste, but to cover the smell of spoiled meat. Refrigerators, of course, didn't exist. And drinking water? People usually preferred to drink beer or diluted wine, even children. Paradoxically, it was healthier than water from wells or rivers, which were often contaminated with waste and dead animals. Some regions were known for their people drinking alcohol practically all day long. In Germany, for example, beer was considered a drink for everyone, even for children, because its alcoholic content killed bacteria. People rose with the sun. They worked from dawn to dusk. Craftsmen, farmers, servants. The work was hard, monotonous, and dangerous. In towns, guilds were everywhere: bakers, blacksmiths, butchers. Each had their own rules and strict limitations. An apprentice had to serve for years before becoming a journeyman, and only then could he aim to become a master. Even children started working very early. By the age of 4, a child was already helping in the fields or at home. Childhood hardly existed. By the age of 10, it was common for children to be in apprenticeships, where they spent entire days working. Yet children in this era often became victims of early death. In the year 1433, for example, more than 40% of children in England died before the age of 10, something that was common across all of medieval Europe. War was also very common in the medieval world. In the year 1415, the Battle of Agincourt took place between the English and French armies, where English King Henry V defeated a much larger French force, an event that had a huge impact on the political situation in Europe. Around that time, the Knights Templar were also founded, a military organization tasked with protecting pilgrims, which later became one of the most powerful knightly orders. Although life in the Middle Ages was full of hardship, people still found ways to enjoy life. Culture, art, and science gradually grew. Painters and sculptors created beautiful works that decorated church buildings and the homes of the nobility. Music became an important part of life, and people sang during holidays and festivals. It was a time when the first universities were founded, where not only religion was taught, but also science, and people began to systematically study the laws of nature, which laid the foundations for the later scientific revolution. In a world without modern technology, where everyday existence was full of fear and difficulty, people were still capable of achieving great things, from the struggle to survive to the creation of art that has endured to this day.